for the weekly political report of the Provisional Central Committee of the Communist Party of Great Britain. And welcome to all our comrades from in the party and beyond. Later on, we'll also have a up-to-date report on the German elections, which are taking place today, from our expert, comrade Tina. So, without any further ado, over to Jack Conrad for the PCC report.
Well, I can let you in on a little secret that the PCC didn't meet today, so it's not really a political report from the PCC. We'll have a get-together after this meeting. My political report, and it will be mine, will be very brief. One, because of what Ian just said, and that's because we've got an instant assessment of the elections in Germany. I think the first exit polls start coming through about 5:30. So this will be hot news. My own report is going to be in two parts. Political report, and then I'm going to go straight into a report of the meeting this morning of fusing communist unity. So I'll go straight from one to the other, just beginning with the news. I sort of couldn't, I've just felt that I couldn't let things, just pass without a comment. This is J.D. Vance in Munich, the 61st Munich Security Conference. This is him breaking with normal diplomatic convention, tearing a strip off the mainstream European leaders, saying that they were more of a threat to Europe's security than Russia and China, telling them that Ukraine wouldn't have a seat at the table in the negotiations, telling them that Europe wouldn't have a seat in the negotiations, that this is going to be a deal struck between Russia and the United States. Obviously, that's caused huge amount of consternation. The BBC is on full propaganda mode. Why, are they genuinely surprised? Surely not. Anyone who listened to Trump during his election campaign would just say he's fulfilling a campaign promise. We've all read, surely, Kellogg's report. He's now the representative of the United States in Ukraine. We know what he was proposing. That's a freeze of the front line with, how should I put it, volunteers providing some sort of peacekeeper force. We know what Russia thinks of that, because we've got Keir Starmer acting as the poodle, coming forward offering British troops. We're expecting troops from Poland, the Netherlands, the Nordic countries, who knows where else. But we're also being told by Trump that he wants his 500 billion from Ukraine, basically in reparations. This is a higher percentage of, in terms of tribute than was imposed on Germany by the Versailles Treaty. On top of that, we've got Trump going on about not 2%, not 2.5%, not 3% of the GDP on, I'll call it arms spending, but 5%. And if you combine that with tariffs, I think this tells you something about the sort of future the United States intends for Europe. Okay, I don't want to push it too far, but nonetheless, I would turn back to Trotsky's writings, who was wrong But nonetheless, I would turn back to Trotsky's post-World War I writings, such as in 1923, when he's raising the United Europe slogan. He actually gets that through the Communist International. And he says, look, without proletarian power, without the proletariat taking a lead in Europe, the United States is condemning Europe to balkanization and absolute economic decay. Well, look at 29. Okay, what we need to explain is what happened after World War II. I'm not going to do that now. Either way, just looking at Germany, stagnation, contraction, Britain barely growing, the rest of the Eurozone barely growing, if not contracting. I would expect things to get worse. Where things will be going politically, initially at least, to the right. That would be my expectation. I don't want to steal anyone's thunder for the later in the meeting, but quite frankly, if AFD didn't do well, I will publicly eat, and I'm talking about the 20% sort of margin.
I thought you liked having your dumb phone.
Shush. Let me talk, please. Thank you. If the AFD doesn't do well, I'll eat my hat, so to speak. Either way, what we had with J.D. Vance was a symbolic meeting after the Munich conference between him and the leader of the AFD, not the Chancellor and not the expected Chancellor. So I think that tells us something about where the United States wants to see Europe in the immediate future. Not unexpectedly, we had a demonstration in London yesterday organized by the Ukrainian Solidarity Campaign. I don't know how many people were there. I've only seen press, pictures, press reports. Either way, we had it sponsored by the TUC, ASLEF, GMB, Unison, the NUM, doesn't really count as a union anymore. We had speeches from all manner of different people, and I just noted two things. One, a banner hold aloft on the demonstration saying, "Arm Ukraine with nukes." We also had Christopher Ford, the secretary of the Ukraine Solidarity Campaign, calling for the British government to supply Ukraine not just with enough weapons to defend itself, which is what he accuses the United States and Europe doing so far, but enough weapons in order to win. And my argument here would be, for that to happen, just arming Ukraine with surplus weapons, which is the Ukraine Solidarity Campaign demand, isn't enough. You need modern weapons, not old weapons. And that, therefore, precisely feeds in to Trump's demand for 2, 3, 4, 5% of GDP being spent on the arms industry. How do you develop new weapons? How do you maintain existing high-tech weapons? You need an awful lot of money. So you get the choice. And the Ukraine Solidarity Campaign ought to have the honesty to say that it's choosing guns over butter. So next time you hear John McDonnell going on about the two-child cap, you have to accuse him of, wanting his cake and eating it. He's saying you can have both guns and butter. You can't, not in a country like Britain, that's for sure. Just a footnote on that. We've been calling for comrades in RS21, Revolutionary Socialism in the 21st Century, to tell us how their organization affiliated to this social imperialist outfit. Was there an opposition to affiliation? When the successful, well done, comrades, motion was put forward to disaffiliate and to characterize this war as a proxy war, was there an opposition, and is there still an opposition? We think that supplying answers on these questions isn't an example of bad culture on the left. We think keeping quiet about such questions is an example of bad culture on the left. So I'll renew my call for comrades to tell us who's who in RS21, and that applies to the rest of the left. But obviously with RS21, it particularly applies because, thank God, they've shifted from being an affiliate of the Ukraine Solidarity Campaign to coming out with something approaching a principled position. Okay, just again, another note, obviously humorous, but nonetheless, there's this story about Trump emailing or putting something up on social media, signing it "the King." And we've had various people comment about this, not least Madonna, not someone I normally follow. But she apparently said that she thought that America was originally established and built by those opposing kings. Not quite true, Madonna. There was a proposal to actually crown George Washington. Instead of that, though, what you had is an elected monarch. That's actually what the US president is. And a load of other people have also being trolling her on the basis, well, it wasn't just Europeans that built America, was it? You're going to forget the slave trade. Anyway, I forgive her myself. Why? Because actually what you've got with Trump is precisely a move to extend the powers of the president and to make the presidency unaccountable in the way that it has been in the past, to Congress, to the Supreme Court, and maybe even to the electorate. Who knows? Either way, this is Trump going beyond the norm in terms of American, how should I put it, tradition, history, what we've seen before. Final note in terms of the politics of the week. We've had Hamas handing over bodies of people killed. I think they were killed. The idea that Hamas, this is Netanyahu, murdered these two kids with their bare hands, to me is just nonsense. I know that there's an IDF report saying they have forensic evidence. Personally, I just can't. I can't buy that one. I think that this is propaganda. In the same way, did Hamas deliberately return the wrong body of the mother? I personally think that the chances of that are pretty remote. Yes, they returned the wrong body because what happened, I would guess, is an Israeli missile, an Israeli bomb landed on the place where they were being held. And they would have been held, I'm guessing, obviously, amongst a lot of other people who also got killed. And quite frankly, they weren't able to see the difference between one charred body or fragments of a body and another. But the point is here is this is being used by Netanyahu to renege on the ceasefire, and basically it's being used by Netanyahu to set Israel up to continue its war on Gaza and the West Bank. That's my reading of the situation. Okay, seamlessly moving on. This is a meeting between comrades. I can't remember the name that they're calling themselves, but the pro-party faction, which is roughly half the editorial board of this online journal, Prometheus, and talking about socialism and representatives of the CPGB, namely myself and Mike McNair. We met this morning, and other than having some sort of business about when we're going to meet, face to face, and other such questions, what we concentrated on, and clearly are going to have to concentrate on for the immediate future, is not just the question of program, but the CPGB's draft program, because obviously we've spent a long time drafting our program. It's a serious document, and we put that forward not only for the future party, we put it forward in terms of a process of going towards such a party. It's also a program that we require our present membership. There is no CPGB, there's no party, but there are party members. We require members of the CPGB to accept that program as the basis of joint action. Okay, so our first, how should I put it, contribution to today's discussion was myself. I was asked to give an introduction to the program. Helpfully, the comrades in TASS, and in particular, Comrade Ed Potts, had produced a document criticizing or raising questions about our draft program. So instead of me, starting off with the introduction and taking them through the draft program stage by stage, I put all that aside and simply answered, I think, the main doubts, the main differences, the main issues that I think that we have to overcome. The comrades in Prometheus didn't participate, verbally, so I can't say what they thought. I saw some nodding heads, but hey, that's nothing more than that. Anyway, I began, I think usefully, on the question of length, because it's right that if you look at our draft program, the whole thing comes in at something like 13,000 words. And if you add what we have, the rules of a future Communist Party and the present Communist Party, in terms of its membership, it's over that. Either way, 13,000 words. And if you compare that with the Erfurt program, the program written in Engels's front room down the road from me now in what the hell is it called? Primrose Hill. If you look at the program that was drawn up by Plekhanov and agreed with amendments at the second Congress of the RSDLP, ours is a heavy, long program. Theirs was basically hundreds, maybe a couple of thousand words. Ours is about the length of a weekly worker supplement. Ours is actually much shorter than the old official programs of the CPGB called the British Road to Socialism, perhaps a bit longer than the initial draft programs of the CPGB in the 20s and 30s. Either way, being conscious of that, I made two arguments. And the first one was, hey, yes, we know it's long, but an awful lot of history has happened. And we can't in that sense start at the beginning and pretend that people don't know anything about the split in socialism in 1914, World War I, World War II, the growth of Stalinism, the collapse of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, this peculiarity of what China is, the collapse of the official CPGB, the collapse of the Communist Party of France, the collapse of the Italian Communist Party. We can't ignore that. We can't ignore the fact that in the Soviet Union, what was called socialism was more akin to a hellish parody of socialism. The working class did not exercise state power. The working class was exploited under that system. It wasn't capitalism, in my view, but either way, we have to deal with that. Just as the Russian Communist Party, when it came out with a new draft of its program that had served it well since 1903, in 1919, it drew up a new program. It just taken power. There'd been World War. There'd been a split in socialism. They were trying to establish the Communist International, and they wrote a political program. And that political program came in, because I measured it, 9,100 words. Worthwhile noting also that Bukharin also drafted in note form a program for the Communist International, and this was 1922, and his notes come in at 6,300. So while I take the position, and I do, that I'm very reluctant to add more to our draft program, I'm all in favor of having separate, how should I put it, sets of theses and resolutions on Northern Ireland, Palestine, the trans question, the women's question, all sorts of things. I'm reluctant to add to the draft program. Why? Because tendency would be you end up with 15 volumes, and you have to be an expert in the draft program to know which volume to search out answers to questions. So the program needs to be as brief as possible, but also as long as necessary. That is my argument, because what we've got with the comrades in TAS, I think, is the idea that they can produce something of the length of the program of the French Workers' Party, Erfurt, or it's longer, RSDLP in 1903. We also had a difference, and I think it's an important one, around our insistence that comrades accept the draft program, not agree with the draft program. This is important in my view. It's not because we want to, how should we put it, blur lines. It's not because we want to come to some sort of rotten compromise with centrists or right opportunists, let alone social imperialists. We don't want to do that. But we do think there will be, legitimate differences amongst comrades on a whole range of different and important issues. So what we're saying to comrades in the minority, argue your case. You've got the chance of becoming a majority. Meanwhile, what you have to do is accept this as the basis of joint action. That's been the approach of classical social democracy. That has been the approach of official communism. That's been the approach of the Russian Communist Party. It's not agree, it's accept. And what the comrades are putting forward is what we want is agree. I'm very hesitant on that. But also what I detect, and we obviously need to explore this, is if we have to agree, what it puts forward is the possibility of veto. I don't agree with that. It implies the politics of consensus, that we all have to agree on something. And if we disagree, it gives us a veto of what's in the program. And I don't think that's the right way to proceed. I think what we need is a situation where we have democratic votes, where we have debate about program. And precisely what we have, as I've argued, is minorities arguing with the rest of the comrades in the struggle to become the majority. I think that's the better way of proceeding. So I'm very much against the idea that what we need to do is agree to a draft program rather than accept a draft program. There's also the idea, again, this needs teasing out because we only had a couple of hours or less than a couple of hours to talk. But what seems to be the idea is that what we have is a draft program for our present stage of communist fusion. As we go forward, we'll produce another draft. As we go even further forward, we produce another draft, etc., 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 until we arrive at the point of where we have a genuine mass communist party. That seems to be an idea. I reject that idea. Note that if you look back at our history, I already referred to the Second Congress of the RSDLP. The RSDLP was an idea. It wasn't a party. The Second Congress established a position where they could go forward and make themselves into a party of the working class, to actually organize the working class into a party. That was achieved, okay, by two wings in 1905. Nonetheless, what you also had is, having built themselves into a mass party over 1905, 1906, 1907, is a period of reaction of where the comrades had to operate, not exclusively, but mainly from abroad. They had to operate underground. They managed with the same program from 1903, when they were an idea of a party, until 1917, when the Bolsheviks led the working class in the conquest of state power. And it was only then that they redrafted their program, which I've already referred to. You could make the same argument about the Gotha program. I know Mike and myself have got differences. You know, was Marx right? Was he wrong? Either way, we were talking not about a mass party of the working class. The Eisenachers and the Lassallians coming together was a great step forward in many senses, a lot more forces than we're talking about today. But these were still groups. Either way, the point would be that the Erthort program, which replaced the Gotha program, wasn't because the party had assumed mass proportions. It was the Marxists taking the initiative to make the corrections to the program, the compromises that Babel and Liebknecht made in terms of bringing the Lassallians, without Lassalle who was dead, on board. That was the significance of the Erthort program. The Bolsheviks, as I said, of course, added to their programmatic armory, once, what's it called? Two Tactics of Social Democracy and the Democratic Revolution, etc., etc. Nonetheless, the point would be this program is designed to equip our party from where it is now, which is an idea of a party, all the way through to the conquest of state power. Right, 29 minutes past. I'll try, Tina, to keep to quarter of an hour, and hopefully you'll have all the results flooding in and will be able to give us not the definitive take on the German election, but your initial assessment. I think another point of contention, which is important, is the whole question of transition. The comrades seem to be arguing, and I wasn't quite sure, seemed to be arguing that what you would do, having come to power, is basically expropriate everything. You would, again, I think that this is accurate. I think they have the idea that you get rid of wage labor on day one. And so when we were putting forward the idea, as we put forward it today, and we put it forward in the draft program, that the transition, what we call socialism, take that from Lenin's State and Revolution, where he said, oh, what Marx called the lower stage of communism, everyone now calls socialism. I'm using it in that way, the lower stage of communism, socialism. And it goes from when you take power over capitalism as it is, that includes not only big multinationals and natural monopolies, but also you're taking power over an economy that includes small farmers, small businesses, corner shops, the self-employed. And what the comrades seem to be arguing was that you expropriate it all. And we were arguing that would be a mistake. And Comrade Ed, for example, has said, well, are you putting it forward on the basis of not frightening the horses? And said, well, I don't really like using that phrase. I had no problem with the phrase myself. Exactly. We want to put forward that program, one, because we want to champion the petty bourgeoisie, the middle classes, against big capital, against the ruling class today. And we also want to be assuring them that when we come to power, we will abide by the voluntary principle. So although we will be demanding trade union rights, although we'll be demanding the full force of the law to protect workers in the petty bourgeois, middle class section of the economy, or even amongst the small bourgeois section of the economy, we wouldn't be using force. We wouldn't be expropriating everything. Why? We don't want to frighten the horses. We don't want to push that section of the population into the arms of counter-revolution. Indeed, we are their champions. Not open-endedly. We want to see the end of that class. And we don't believe, of course, that we're living in Russia. Russia had 90% peasant population. Okay, we can look at small peasants, middle peasants, kulaks, blah, blah, blah. Nonetheless, the middle classes form a distinct social segment in countries like Britain. And we need a program of where the working class aspires to rule over that section of the population as it is voluntarily proletarianized, as it's voluntarily absorbed into a class that is ceasing to become a class. The working class seeks to abolish itself as a class. We also had, again, talking about agreement, and you have to agree with everything. I made the point where we had a document from the comrades in TASS saying, well, we take these points as where we're all going to agree. Communism is democratic, and they meant the higher stage. And I just made, to me, the elementary point. That's wrong. Communism doesn't have the state. Democracy is a form of the state. So we want to see democracy wither away along with the state. That doesn't mean you don't have votes. It doesn't mean you don't have arguments. But nonetheless, what you don't have is enforcing those votes with a state machine. People just collaborate, associate on a voluntary basis. Okay, couple more minutes then. Also, again, on the basis of what to keep out of the program, the comrades were talking about it would be a good idea, for example, again, I might be wrong here, to include in the program, something we don't do, the current war drive under, well, Joe Biden. Who knows about Trump now? So you've got China, the war drive against China, which I accept. But what's going on with Russia now? And so if you take our draft program, it deliberately avoids anything. I know it can easily be caught out, but we try deliberately to avoid being caught up in, you know, what's Starmer's majority. We don't even mention the Labour Party in our draft program. We mention Labourism, and the importance as a strategic task of overcoming it. But we've left, for example, the Labour Party potentially as a united front of a special kind. We've left that deliberately to elsewhere. Okay, so yes, we had those sort of discussions. We've also got a difference, and I think it's closely related. Is socialism, i.e. the transitionary period, a mode of production? Classically, Marxists have argued, no, it's not, because it begins with capitalism as it is today, and it ends with a mode of production called communism. Communism organized on the basis of no state, no money, no class, no nations, but communism on the basis of people producing according to their abilities, but taking according to their need. You do not begin with that, you end with that. So if you look at our understanding of socialism, it involves a shift from one mode of production where the ruling class is the working class ruling over capitalism, but ends actually with the working class abolishing itself, simply becoming the associated producers. That's something that Marx spoke about, something that social democracy talked about. They've used different names to describe it. So if you look, I think, at the Earththought program, certainly at Kautsky's Class Struggle, talks about the socialist commonwealth or some other phrase along those lines. But in my terminology, it's called socialism, or if you want, the dictatorship of the proletariat, which nowadays needs explaining, but between consenting Marxists, the dictatorship of the proletariat. Okay. I think I'll stop. Well, I'll just come in with one more, and I think this is a positive. I made the argument, again, it's not a point of principle, but it's pleasing what the sort of vibes I got from it. I made the argument that we would be very foolish, especially given where we are today, to found a brandly new named organization. That it would be very, very foolish of us to cast aside the title CPGB, not because the CPGB, when I joined it I joined the YCL in 1969, was such a wonderful organization. It wasn't. It was thoroughly opportunist. It had a wrong program, wrong culture. But no, because we want to associate ourselves with the Communist Manifesto. We want to associate ourselves with the Russian Communist Party of the Bolsheviks. We want to associate ourselves with the Communist International, with criticisms. And we also want to associate ourselves with the early CPGB. Excuse me, I've got to go and answer the door, and I'm going to finish with that, Ian. So